We can now lay on our shadows and highlights to get the sense of form and solidity. I'm going to mix the colours for the shadows first. Simply using burnt umber and French ultramarine, I'm going to mix a shadow glaze of transparent colour, and referring to my photograph, I'm just going to apply this to the areas of greatest shadow. We'll start in the area of feathers across the back of the bird, and the most noticeable shadows are the area here under the scapulars, which are the feathers that cover the shoulders, and they tuck under there, the breast feathers, which lift up over them. Again, in order to blend them smoothly, we'll clean the brush, squeeze out the excess water, and just blend that back over the feathers before it dries. Do it a little at a time, don't save it all up to the end, otherwise you'll find the acrylic will dry and you won't be able to blend it back. The head itself will cast some shadows, so the area just under the head feathers here will be darker. So a little bit of shadow there, just instantly brushed back. We'll add that. Looking at my reference again, there's another interesting shadow area along these feathers here, this little row of feathers. Now the shape of some of these feather groups is also important. This area of feathers here, which are the coverts over the secondary feathers, are curved. So as they come out from that shadow, they will come into the light, and then they will curve again into shadow. So again, apply the shadow as we see it and use the damp brush just to blend it back. This constant application of transparent paint and blending builds up a sense of form and softness. The secondaries will have a little bit of shadow just under where the coverts I see are just lifted a bit, and that will help define that little group there. There's a big gap under here, and that will cast quite a strong shadow back onto these feathers that lay above the tail. And again, it's important to make sure that the soft edge is maintained just by blending that back. And the edges of these feathers are rounded. So again, one edge will be hard, but the edge that curves back across the back of the bird will be soft. Some of these shapes and shadows will need defining with deeper applications of colour, but let them all dry and go over them later, rather than worry and fiddle too much with them at this stage. This whole head turned away from the light will actually be in shadow. So I'm just going to block in a shadow for that, allowing for the fact that the light is going to come round there. And we'll just darken this in a little bit round here, take that down to there. To there, by which time the earlier part of this exercise in glazing should be dry, and where there's a particular shadow you can strengthen that with just another application of the same glaze. And we'll just blend that out. Finally, we'll just take some burnt umber just to get our shadows in under here, because they're important just here, because they're deep underneath. Although they're light feathers, they are deep in the shadow area of the bird there. And we'll just blend those off so that they're nice and soft. Okay. I think finally we need some shape to this part here. And again, blend this back to maintain softness. Now we need to put the highlights on the bird, and this can simply be done with titanium white. And use exactly the same technique of applying the paint with a fine round brush and then softening it in exactly the same way into the darker areas. Now, all the areas that receive light need to be painted, whether they're white, yellow or black. It makes no difference. What we're painting is the light falling on this bird. Okay, and again, once done, we'll soften this white down the side of the bill. That's enough at this stage. A little bit more is needed, but we'll let that dry. You'll notice again the white has dulled down quite a bit, but that adds to the softness. Don't worry about that. You can always go back and strengthen the white. And we would just build up our highlight using titanium white to make the three-dimensional shape of the bird's head. What we can do as well, because these feathers are raised above the feathers along the back and the wings, we can just highlight the tips of those just to lift them. This is particularly effective in the areas where we're going to paint a strong shadow on the other side of this highlighted feathers. Again, it's important to keep your brush strokes going in the shape or the direction of the feathers. It all helps build up a feather texture. I'm switching to a bigger brush now to work down the body. Using the same dilute mix, we'll start to work across the back of the bird. Right on the top of the back where it's catching the direct sunlight, it will be quite bright. Each feather will have its own light and shadow. If you don't put it in, they will look a little flat. They will look more like roof tiles than feathers. It's important to get that feeling of shape in each feather, and it's easy to do that with white rather than fiddle about mixing light tones. In this area here of coverts, these feathers are quite small and closely packed together. They have more of an overall effect of light rather than individual feather effect. I would still want to see my drawing at this stage because we can put a few in with some definition later, but it's a good idea just to put some light on this as a group of feathers rather than individual feathers, and it'll help establish the feeling of small, closely packed feathers. And I'll continue and just lighten again half of each of these larger feathers to give them a feeling of structure. The light will catch the edges of our primary feathers and it will strike the top of the tail feathers where the black band is. Don't forget to paint light over anything that's dark. It's easy to forget that and ignore it because it's black, but then you lose the sense of three dimensions